Middleton, and welcome to this episode of Raising the Volume. Today, we are happy to have with us Dr. Kylon Middleton, who is one of the biggest movers and shakers in our city here, and we're just ecstatic that he has put some time in his schedule, and we'll get through all of that in order to be with us. So welcome to the program, sir.
Good to be here.
Good, thank you. So now, for those of us, or for those of the audience that's watching, let's just start from the beginning. You were born and raised here in Charleston.
Yeah, so I'm Kylon Middleton, born right here. I'm a son of the soil, born in Charleston, Radcliffe, Jasper Streets, that's where I grew up. Went to Meminger Elementary School, Courtney Middle School, Burke High School, graduated from Burke High School and went to the College of Charleston. So I've done just about everything right here.
Education
everything here. My parents are pillars of this community. My dad has now gone to be with the Lord in 2005, but my mother is still strong in her commitments to just raising the volume in the community.
Right.
And so I have one son. He's a grad student now at East Carolina University, and I'm getting to renegotiating that relationship with him as an adult person. And so that's very interesting, but he's doing well, doing his own thing, just got his first job. He's a court reporter in the Triangle area, so he's really branching out. His mother and I are very proud of him, and so that's me. I'm just really an introvert, a recluse, and on the in my spare time, I'm sort of like a community organizer and somebody in the community, just making a lot of noise, trying to bring at least light to issues, amplifying voice, and providing agency for individuals who have been marginalized and oppressed.
Now, when you graduated from Burke and you go to the College of Charleston, what did you major in?
Yeah, so I graduated from Burke. I was 15, so I mean,
wow.
I graduated very early from Burke High School. I didn't really know a lot, except I knew I wanted to go to the College of Charleston. I thought I wanted to be a doctor, a medical doctor. And so I started as a pre-med student, and that's where I started at the College of Charleston until I hit the wall of racism and systemic injustice, through one of my professors who's noted and an acclaimed person at the College of Charleston, but he sat me down and told me that sciences were not for black people.
Wow.
And that I wasn't going to make it. And in fact, I found myself comparing my grades to individuals who were in lab groups with me, and we all had a group assignment, but my grades were always lower, and we turned in the same information, and so that was my introit, to kind of like in your face discrimination and injustice. So deflated, completely defeated, I left, finally developed enough courage to go confront the professor once I, sort of talked with some of my peers and recognized, that my grades were different from theirs. They were all white. Of course I was black, and then he had this conversation with me telling me as a black person, I would never make it in the sciences. I would never be a doctor, that sort of thing. And I had never heard that kind of thing before. Of course at Burke they were building us up, know. And so I left his office not knowing what I would ever do. I was on George Street walking out of the science building near Cumming, and Nan Morrison, who was a professor, English department chair at the time, at the College of Charleston, saw me, and I mean, during that time the college was much smaller than it is now, but she saw me walking on George Street looking like a deer in the headlights, and I don't think I was crying because I was angry enough to just shed tears, but I was not crying, but I was completely lost because I didn't know what to do. That was my dream. That was the only pathway I had seen for myself and the only trajectory I had at that time. And she brought me in her office. She knew something was wrong, brought me in her office. I expressed to her, what had just happened, and she was like, he's a jerk. And she had some other choice words. And from that point, she walked me over to the places where back then, everything was not as computerized as it is now. So we went to the advising center and to she changed, got me to change my major, made herself my advisor, and from that point I started majoring in English. And so I majored in English. I graduated with a dual degree in English and communications. I loved Bryant Gumbel, so I was going to be the next Bryant Gumbel. Right. He was on the Today Show.
That's right.
I was a big Today Show fan at the time.
Khakis.
And so Bryant, he was my idol during those days, and I'm like, I'm going to be the next Bryant Gumbel. Well, of course, that didn't happen. So I taught high school English. I became an assistant principal, a principal, an assistant superintendent, and a superintendent.
Now, I did, in reading your bio and just knowing you for, some years and everything, I did know that. I didn't know, I guess when I started to hear your name again, it was in church.
Yeah.
But I didn't know, where were you?
So I started teaching. I started teaching at Burke. So in the black church, I know people kind of recognize that I'm a pastor, and I've been a pastor since I was 16. And so in the AME church, which you are well familiar, back in those days, the only requirement for the first ordination, there are 2 ordinations, was a high school diploma. And I graduated from high school. I was 15. And really the only requirement for ordination was a diploma back then. So I didn't have to have seminary, didn't have to have college, et cetera. And so I got a church, literally I turned 16 months later, but I got a church when we went to conference that same year. And so at the age of 16, I was pastoring and a college student. So I've always had a grown-up job, right? But
was that Bishop James?
That was Bishop James. And being a pastor in the AME church, and he was a great inspiration. He developed young people, and he saw something in me way back then, along with Clemente Pinckney, and we were contemporaries at the time, the 2 youngest individuals who were kind of moving in that way. And he gave me a church, but I also recognized that along with my church, I had to have a job. And so I started teaching English right at Burke, taught 12th grade English right at Burke High School. When I was transferred from the conference in this area to the Columbia annual conference, because I was going to seminary up there to the Lutheran Theological Southern Seminary, I taught at Eau Claire High School and Richland Northeast. Went from there, I was going to work on a PhD at Duke, and subsequently also went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and pastored in Durham, and I became an assistant principal, a principal, first school, Jordan High School in Durham, North Carolina, Riverside High School, and then became principal of Riverside High School, and then went to Brunswick County, where I was principal of West Brunswick High School, and then Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools, East Chapel Hill High School, and then my last district, I was principal of Overhills High School in Harnett County, and then became an assistant superintendent and interim superintendent there. And so I've had a very decorated career in education.
Yes, absolutely. So then you are in North Carolina. How do you get back to home?
Yeah, because my wife wanted to come back here. I promised, during that time we were going there just to work on that degree, and then when the degree was finished, we would come back home. But I fell in love with the Triangle area, so I never wanted to come back. And so, I kept hearing that, so I had to do something about it, right? And so I put in for the transfer. It took longer than, the wheels of African Methodism are very slow. It was 2 different Episcopal districts, and so I was transferred back to Georgetown, where I became pastor of Hopewell, and built a $3.5 million facility there, and so.
That's where Jared is now.
That's where Jared is now. Yeah. We built that up for him.
Right.
He would tell people he built it by the way he acts. But anyway, long story. But yeah, that's where I was for nearly 18 years, and so during that time I was kind of commuting back and forth, still working in school systems in North Carolina. Because I was trying to kind of fill out my retirement years there, since I was close in the number of years to retiring. I saw that goalpost, so I didn't want to abort that system before being able to retire. And in 2014, I reached that goal with the number of years I needed to retire out of the North Carolina system, and did.
You come back home, you're at Hopewell, and then you are assigned to one of the most historic churches in the AME church,
Yes.
Mount Zion, Glebe Street.
Yes.
Being from Charleston and then being at that church, how did that feel?
That is a very, you have to sit down and think about that. You know, the individuals, you know, who have, you know, sort of graced that historic pulpit, you know, to include Frederick Douglass, who was not necessarily an AME, but who Bishop Hurd brought him, or Reverend Hurd at the time, who was pastor of Mount Zion, brought him down to really, you know, speak to the affairs of blacks in the South, you know, during the late 1800s. And so, yeah, I'm the 33rd pastor. You know, of no other church where I've pastored had I had to put myself in a numerical context, right?
Right.
But at Mount Zion,
That's
you know, you're a part of that
right.
type of longitudinal history where you are now number 33, and as number 33 there is a responsibility, there's a historic weight that comes along with that. You can't just be run-of-the-mill Pastor X,
right.
you know, trying to just kind of, you know, keep things humming along, you know, as in some cases individuals may do, but there was an imperative for you know, social justice, for racial reconciliation, an imperative for community activism, an imperative for prophetic voice, you know, and agency to continue that tradition and that work. And I sat there and I was like, okay, here we go.
Here we go.
Here we go. And so, yes, I'm from Charleston, but never in my life would I've imagined being made pastor of Mount Zion.
So you get in there and immediately go to work.
I have to, yeah, because, you know, we're in the sea of gentrification. So, I mean, it required a different kind of work. It required, you know, reimagination, because when I went, you know, a lot of the congregants had already, you know, based on just a lot of things that are happening to every congregation, you know, they had been sort of driven other places based on gentrification and the how we were tightly squeezed, you know, in that whole Glebe Street context where there's no parking, there seemed to be no opportunities thereof, and so I had to get to work immediately as it relates to how will our people access the church. Many of them who historically lived in and around the area where the church is, well, we know we don't live in the city anymore. And so individuals now live, you know, in North Charleston and even beyond, Monk's Corner, Goose Creek, Somerville, et cetera. And so we had to then give people a reason to come back to the city. We had to give them, and certainly the church, the historic nature of the church was a reason and a draw enough, but when you came down there and you had to circle the block for, you know, the whole time that people would be in worship, then you missed the whole service, so that was discouraging within itself. So I had to kind of observe what was going on around me and recognize, well, you know, here's this other church next door to me, and they have X number of services, and those people seem to be walking from somewhere, so I recognized that they were parking in garages that were equidistant to the church that we did not have access to at the time. And so it became, you know, again, an equity issue, a justice issue, a fairness issue. It became just the same thing. I mean, we're all part of the same city. And so we had to fight systems. I mean, walking through the door, and that was 2015. And so I'm not talking about 1950. I'm talking about 2015. And there was an intentional design because, again, there are, you know, entities that want that building. They want that structure. They want that context.
That location.
And they want that location. It is real estate.
Yes.
And so, and certainly I recognized that when I walked through the door and determined, you know, regardless of what our internal situation looked like at the time, we were going to struggle to stay right where we are. There are so many others who have moved from the peninsula, but we have not only survived, you know, especially in this transition and in the time, you know, that God ordained for me to be there. We are thriving in the city. We are thriving, really, and I don't say that lightly. We are thriving in this city, and we remain relevant.
Now, I have been inside that church as long as I can remember, whether it was for, you know, just going there with my folks, I mean, and you know my parents and how much they rolled, and Dad being a retired AME minister. I've always enjoyed going to that church and being, in the audience for programs. I notice, just being as a musician myself, that there are a lot of musical programs and things that happen in that church. It's not only a fantastic place for worship, but it's also been a place for the community to congregate in order to observe things, whether it's for Piccolo Spoleto or any other event. Talk a little bit about how the church has done that for the community.
Yeah. The church has always done that. Again, black churches have been the hub for more than just religious activity. It's been the hub for social justice organization, for community meetings, for cultural expression. It has been the place where, especially in the black context, where we could go and truly, participate and be leaders in those areas. And yes, I've said this recently in another interview, that Mount Zion is the community's church. Our doors are literally open. And right now we're undergoing a multi-million-dollar restoration, renovation, and expansion to further provide accommodations and or a physical plant for the community to truly, take full advantage of. It has been a place, as you talked about just a minute ago, of cultural expression. We've hosted the Color of Music.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Color of Music. Lee Pringle and his group, black musicians. It's particularly rooted in that. From concert pianists to vocalists, who could be singing in Carnegie Hall. They are featured there at Mount Zion, from Living Your Truth series with the Social Justice Racial Equity Collaborative through the Sophia Institute, hosting conversations that are transformational, that are rooted in racial healing, and that are centered in just literally truth-telling, which has become a lost art in these last few years. It's like we have kind of moved away from that certain appreciation for the truth. And then just Mount Zion itself, you could find Mount Zion's choir in concert singing Handel's Messiah. We have partnered now with the Charleston Symphony Orchestra, and just before the concert that we normally feature you in a jazz Christmas gospel meets jazz kind of context, which is a different thing for the community. But the night before that concert, the Christmas gospel meets jazz, is a different kind of concert. We have Handel Messiah along with the Charleston Symphony Orchestra, and we partnered with them at the church because they were looking for other community sponsorship opportunities where the orchestra itself, symphony orchestra, would give to the community out of their outreach a free concert. So they partnered with us. We were ready to go because of course based on the classical sort of appreciation of eclectic musical repertoire of those in Mount Zion, that just fit right in. So our choir is trained enough, to have a range that goes from Beethoven, Bach, all the way down to down home, gospel music. So it is a great place to be. And when I continue looking at specific other things, so we've started also, engaging in community building sort of conversations with the police force in the police department, because again, looking at public safety is all of our responsibility. And so we've then extended that to become leaders in building bridges and trying to create opportunities for trust for the community to come in order to have very courageous dialogue with the police. And then, through any political cycle, you can see any major presidential, senatorial, and or political personality featured just stomping through Mount Zion in a way. And so it has become that church. I know we talk about other churches, but you can't ever minimize the very relevance of Mount Zion in our contemporary culture.
Exactly. Now, I've got to go on record, and I'm going to look directly into the camera. You said something just a minute or two ago about, restoration, and part of that is a big, brand new organ that you have coming at that church. Being an organist myself, I am putting you on notice now that I will be at your church to play that fabulous new organ.
Come on, we have restored it just for you, just for you to come and play.
Big
and certainly
four-manual
it's going to be a
organ,
four-manual pipe organ. Again, the appreciation for classical music and the depth, of just the experience of being able to come in one place, to be able to fully, allowed to be enveloped in that. I feel God, in that music ministry, that pipe organ playing. Yeah, I like a good Hammond. I'm a musician too, I like a good Hammond organ from time to time. But a four-manual,
that
pipe,
majestic comes through.
And then just the power that will go along with it, based on some of the other implementations and placement of some of the internal workings of the organ. It is going to be a brand new Mount Zion, a brand new sound. It will fill and fuel the soul.
Oh, absolutely. So, in addition to into all of the wonderful and marvelous things that you are doing at Mount Zion, you're also very active with your activism in the community. Can you tell us some of the projects and initiatives and things that you have done? And I think about that, circle back to how all of the pastors, like you said, that have come before, and you being number 30, the 32 have all. That's literally part of it. To be very active in the community and take up the charge for a lot of issues and things. And you certainly have done your share so far with that, and continue. And congratulations on your recent election.
Thank you.
Can you tell us exactly what that is, in addition to?
Yeah, so I ran for Charleston County Council, District 6, and won. We had a primary and a general election, so I feel like I've been running all throughout the entire pandemic. As soon as we shut down, I was kind of like running for office in a new and different way. And so I decided to get involved. I've been involved as an outside agitator, borrowing from Cleveland Sellers. Sometimes I learned that beyond being an outside agitator, you have to kind of like be at the table of decision making and influencing or sort of really driving and directing some of these policy implementations so that they are just, fair, and equitable for everybody who lives and works and are in our community. And so that's part of it. Definitely, as pastor of Mount Zion, there is a responsibility to the community.
Right.
And so for me, I'm an introvert. People don't believe I'm an introvert, but I mean, I am just as well being a part of the curtain decoration, here in this place. And you would not know that I'm in the room. I could be a fly on the wall because I just, I get my energy internally. But at the same token, I recognize that I had to shed that introverted perspective quick in order to engage in the enormity of the responsibility of my office as pastor. As pastor of a historically black church, particularly Mount Zion AME Church, I could not really enclose myself in an office and find that to be an effective position, not only for the church, but also for the community. And so immediately, of course, I came here on the heels of tragedy. So I was appointed, and as pastor of Mount Zion, we were appointed by our bishop. I was appointed in 2015. Again, in that Mother Emanuel tragedy, I lost the closest and dearest friend of mine, who we were like brothers, Clemente Pinckney. And his family and I mean, we're still, inextricably linked. as a result. I was there when both his children were born, literally in the room when they were born. We are that close, their godparent and that sort of thing. So, coming here after that tragedy, it was really a tough time. And then to recognize that immediately you had to pivot.
You gotta go.
And you have to be ready to lead. And so certainly I was ready to do that, recognizing, number one, we needed to heal our community in the aftermath of what happened at Mother Emanuel. We needed, individuals who recognized that forgiveness was a process and not just, a one shot, just because individuals said it at a bond hearing. There was a little bit more unpacking to that needed to occur. So we needed to have a more reconciling sort of opportunity for the community itself at large to begin grappling with all of these undercurrent issues. As Americans, and certainly as Charlestonians, we've never really dealt with the issue of slavery. Right. And it was, literally people, our ancestors were brought here, literally at the shores of Charleston. So we had to then start talking about that. I started formulating groups and circles and organizing discussions and listening sessions and all sorts of, a lot of work, thousands and thousands and thousands of individuals engaging, and I think they're an elevated level of awareness, talking about raising the volume, not remaining mute or silent, because again, in that area, it's so easy to just acquiesce and to then sidestep the issue. But no, we need to have direct conversations about race in America.
Definitely.
And even now, especially now, and I guess those things were precursors, because as we sort of were swept into where we are now, those earlier conversations, sort of paved the way to at least strip the veneer and cause us to go, beneath the surface to have the larger conversations, especially now in the aftermath of what we've seen exacerbated in our country. So as a community organizer, I find myself, during the summer after George Floyd, and even before George Floyd, just to be honest, but definitely in the aftermath of George Floyd, and as early as last week, still demonstrating and protesting and still marching in ways that, again, we raise the volume and we amplify the issues of justice, because again, we can never be complacent, we can never be satisfied with where we are, recognizing that all of the justice-oriented rights and or advancements of the 60s and other eras that have come have been rolled back in our time.
Right.
And so, I continue going back to lift every voice and sing the Negro National Anthem, yet with a steady beat. Have not our weary feet. And I keep reminding myself every day, even as an introvert, there has to be a steady beat of justice. And somebody has to be beating that drum. You can't get tired.
Right.
And so for a person like me, when everybody else kind of sort of went away, or, the fad, had passed and they had become weary, look here, I'm still out there. And so we are incubating and we are cultivating and meeting with younger individuals who are now really taking the charge, which is very good.
That's good.
In my opinion. But at the same token, I think they do need, some steadier, mentoring and people who are able to tell them. Because beyond just being out there marching and protesting, definitely not looting and rioting and that sort of thing, but marching and protesting and demonstrating, you have to be doing it for something. Correct. And so beyond just for the John C. Calhoun statue to come down, which I, certainly was there when the statue came down, it was on the anniversary of the tragedy as well. And I was up in Marion at the grave of Clemente Pinckney with his family, and came down in time for that statue, at least the reading, of the proclamation to take the statue down. And I definitely agree, that such symbols should come down. But then when you do not deal with the policies behind that symbol, then we've just taken the statue down. We haven't changed anything. So meeting with those individuals, continuing to train, nurture, and develop the next generation of civil rights activists, because we need individuals beyond, Jesus. So, again, I'm a Christian and certainly a person of faith, and I'm just using a Christian context at this time. Jesus was a radical. He was a Jew, really. He was not a Christian, but Jesus was a radical. And Jesus did not only deal with the spiritual issues of the individuals, Jesus dealt with the social issues of the day. And so those things that were right in your face as it related to areas of justice that needed to be handled, he was not afraid to do that. And so we're nurturing those individuals. We're creating, a healthy stirring, of those gifts, so that, individuals can be empowered to go out there. And then lastly, it motivated me to then run for office. So I'm one of the ones who say, I would never run for office, right? I don't, after retiring, because I've been working like bivocationally my whole life, literally. And then finally, when I was able to have enough years in the educational system, I was like, okay, I'm done. And I walked away from that, so I was pastoring only, and then kind of community, organizing and just on the grounds in Charleston, doing a whole lot of things in order to make our situation better, just from behind the scenes and in front, publicly in front too. But I decided that now was the time. I kept praying. I said, Lord, somebody needs to, run for this and change that. And I did recognize that there, presidential ticket, the U.S. Senate and Congress, and then, our state house races. But, I'm not interested so much in leaving Charleston after being gone. So I was looking at some of the more local contexts that really impact our lives, and people don't really look at county council in that way. But county council makes a lot of decisions that impacts our lives, in ways that we see every day. Just like the Phillips community very historic Phillips community over there in Mount Pleasant.
Not far from my community.
Right from near your community, that they were about to run a road right through and didn't think anything about it except the fact that it seemed to be, a place that they could do it, that nobody would really, raise a whole lot of stink about it. But then they saw the volume go up on that real quick.
Right.
They were not listening to the native folk, and then finally other people got involved. So it caused me, to come off of the sidelines and recognize I needed to be a little bit more active. I did have a voice. I do have the ability and time at this point, and I did. I ran for office. It was not a cakewalk.
Right.
When you run for office, you got to be ready.
Right.
And won. And so now we get to work. But I think that, being pastor of Mount Zion has really informed my urgency for being involved. And sometimes I say, enough, don't do any more. And then I become, even more stirred, to do something in addition. Because when we look at the times in which we live, it is so urgent, that we all step up and do our parts. And like Paul in the Bible, the Apostle Paul, he said, he in some of his letters that he was being poured out, like a drink offering, in Philippians. And sometimes I feel like I have been fully spent, but at the same token, from somewhere, God, I say, endows me with strength, to continue fighting and continuing to build capacity to do those things that make our community better.
So probably a lot of your parishioners and folks that have known your parents that are probably still around look at you and say, "Oh, that's young. That's still young."
Right.
Young
yeah. Especially some people who taught me.
Right.
Too.
Definitely.
Because I was certainly not. I was always a studious student, but they had to give me a lot to do, because if they didn't give me enough to do, I would get into a lot of mischief.
Right.
And so sometimes that's how I got skipped from one grade to another, because I was not being challenged. So they were like, "Oh, we're gonna just put him in third grade."
Right.
And maybe that will occupy his mind enough that he will stop wreaking havoc on our classes. And so Yeah, you live in the shadows of your parents. My parents are large people, and but I think I have been able to hold my own.
Yeah. So what sort of advice would you give to young people younger than yourself, that college crew just out of undergraduate school, or even the high schoolers that are wanting to be involved in community things?
So I would say to young people who want to be involved, you have to pick something. You have to be passionate about something. You have to be something has to fuel your involvement. You can't just jump on a bandwagon because there's one rolling right by. You have to recognize based on your purpose, based on your voice, based on your interests, those things that you are most passionate about, and things that you have a natural sort of disposition that you can begin to lend your voice, your experiences, your talents, and or whatever your gifts to, that will then make it that much more authentic in convincing other folk, that especially as it relates to issues of justice and or these deep issues, that first of all you have to identify, I call it your mission field, or your lane. You have to identify your lane. You found your lane. I played trumpet too now, so don't. But I recognize
we're coming back to that.
But I recognize that was not my full lane.
We will come back to that right there.
And I know my band director George Kenny and others. They are
That's
probably very disappointed that I did not fully develop, because I could have been like the Emmy Award-winning Charlton Singleton. So I still pick the trumpet up, but I would never stand up next to you.
You should not have told me that.
I would never stand up in front. But young people, you have to pick your lane. You have to choose your, I call it a mission field, because that is what is going to give you energy. That's what's going to give you inspiration. Sometimes when we do things because other folk want us to do it, then we don't put everything we have into it. But those things that are you, those things that exude from you, it's not even work. It's like breathing air. I mean, you do these things naturally because they're a part of your disposition. So the first thing I would say is just find that area that has been well suited and crafted and made for you, and then transform that. Transform that area. Be it in music, break the ceilings. I'm still amazed in 2020 that we are still being the first. Do you realize that I'm the first person of color elected to District 6 Charleston County Council? First person. And so why? And so when you find your individual area, then be the first individual to then break through, for women or for people of color or for whatever, area you find yourself, fighting, break the ceiling. Kamala Harris is about to do it in the political arena. And so there's still room, for us to attain and aspire and add to the long legacy of individuals. Then the next thing I would say to young people who are, sort of trying to find themselves and establish themselves, especially college-age young people, you have to be serious. And I know that's almost antithetical to the age group.
Right.
But at some point, you have to, kind of recognize that now is the time I have to grow up. And I have to be serious about something. I have to be, even as it relates to, your own responsibilities. Nobody should have to be waking you up or, telling you where to be. Or at some point, you have to accept the reality that you're an adult. I remember the day I woke up and I said, well, I'm grown now.
That's right.
I had bills. I had responsibilities. I had, at some point I had
starts.
I was an adult, so I could not then depend on anyone else, God, yes, but any other person to provide for me. So I would say be serious about your own capacity as a grown person to affect positive change. when you're serious about something and when you grow up in such a way that you are mature, you could be I was 16 years old, but I guarantee you I pastored my church. They recognized that I meant business, and they knew I may not have, and some would say, well, I have great-grandchildren older than you, but they respected me as their pastor because I was serious. I had, developed a maturity in that area. And so I would say to young people, kind of be serious enough and allow yourself to mature so that you can be taken seriously in the things in which you fight for. And then the last thing I would say is you have to have a little fun. I know that sounds, different coming from me, but I have a lot of fun, and I do believe that in life you have to be serious as it relates to responsibilities and recognizing, the weight of whatever the world, is throwing at us. But then you can't take things so seriously until the extent that you don't enjoy your life. I'm living an abundant life. Let me tell you, when I read that in the Bible, I said, that's my passage. That Jesus came that we might have life and have it more abundantly, not in riches and wealth, but just in joy, in relationships, in our interactions one with another, and the ability to have peace in your life that surpasses even the mere understanding of individuals. And so learn how to enjoy your life. Have fun while your work should be fun. While you're playing, your play should be even more enjoyable. And so when we are living in an abundant, sort of category of life, it is really a rich, full, and rewarding life. So I would just tell them those things.
Yeah.
And I think if they did at least one of them, their lives would be on the right track.
Right. Absolutely. Well, gosh, my brother. First of all, it's always a treat to hear you speak. You're very passionate about what you speak about. I often say, I wonder, to hear you speak about a favorite sports team or something could be
San Francisco 49ers. So we could start there.
I won't hold that against you as a Cowboy fan, but that's a whole nother thing. Yeah. I appreciate you coming on our show, and best of everything for all that you do for the community, all that you do at the church. Don't give me the side eye when I sneak in and I play instead of Alfonso Brown.
Come on.
That's one of my mentors and everything.
Come on.
And one other thing, if someone wanted to get more information about the church, that over at Mount Zion, is there a website or something?
Yeah, they can go to Mount Zion, charlestoname.org, and everything is laid out right there.
Absolutely awesome. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you being on the show, and thank you all for tuning in.
I get scared sometimes.
But as I always say,
it's okay to be afraid.
as long as you face the fear.
And keep moving forward.
Wherever you are in life, count on the name trusted in insurance for over 70 years. BlueCross BlueShield of South Carolina.